Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Am Writing podcast, the Working Bookshelf, aka Am Reading about writing. I'm KJ Dell'Antonia, New York Times bestselling author of The Chicken Sisters, as well as How to Be a Happier Parent, and a former editor at the Times.
And I'm Jennie Nash, author, book coach, entrepreneur, and creator of the Book Coach Certification Program at Author Accelerator.
In almost every episode of this series, Jennie and I will discuss and debate a pair of popular books on writing focusing on a specific topic like characterization, productivity, editing, who knows what? Who knows what else we're going to come up with?
We're going to tell you why these books are our favorites, then engage in heated debate over which is better in our Fight Me segment before getting sidetracked into a discussion of the topic itself.
The result will be Am Writing's usual, actionable, inspirational advice that will help you get your work done, whether you are just getting started, switching genres, changing jobs, or you're a seasoned pro.
Today, we're talking about books that you read when you need reminding why the hell you're doing this.
Yes.
This could have been a very long episode.
It could be a very long, and it could also go in like a zillion different directions. So really, this is an excuse for me to talk about a new favorite of mine that really spoke to me at this exact moment in my writing career and helped me to remember why I'm specifically writing the thing that I'm writing now, and as well as writing in general. And then I made Jennie come up with a book too.
Well, I want to hear all about what you just said because that is just rich and that is everything. And I read the same book that KJ read because we decided to do it on purpose. And she was liking it so much that I read it too. But I did pick another book to go in opposition to yours. So why don't you start by talking about this book and why it moved you so much?
Yes. So this is How to Write an Autobiographical Novel by Alexander Chee. And it is amazing. It is a series of essays. It is not really a book. It will not actually tell you that your autobiographical novel should have a protagonist who, does X by page 25 and does Y at the midpoint and has, and all is lost. That is not what this book is. It's really his story of discovering himself as a writer, sort of over and over and over and over again, which is really interesting because it's like he wanted to be a writer and he would apply to, writing to workshops with Annie Dillard or the Iowa Writing Workshop. But he almost didn't believe he could do it, but he clearly could. And some of that was that he was just trying to resist what he really wanted to write about. So that's really, it's interesting and it's fascinating and it's extremely well done, not surprisingly, because he's a really good writer.
Well, and it's in the tradition. There's a lot of books, and that's why this could have gone in so many directions. There's a lot of books that writers write about writing. And a lot of people do that type of book after they've become sort of famous. Like Frank Conroy did a book like that. Annie Dillard has The Writing Life. But there's, writers, of course, certain writers at a certain point are going to turn to the topic of their own becoming, right? I recently read Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, which is a YA told in prose. And there's a thread through that of her becoming a writer, and in many, many books like this, Alexander Chee, it's also about becoming an observer. That's what writing is, how one observes the world. So there's a grand tradition of books like this, I guess, in that way that are all, I love these kinds of books personally.
Yeah.
But I agree, he is a really good writer.
Well, so you know what? A book like that, like you just pick it up, and you could do this with this one. Just pick it up, choose 3 pages, read a little bit. It's either going to speak to you or it's not. Like sometimes, somebody's version of this book, which is their story of becoming the observer that turned them into the writer that they are. Sometimes it's not going to speak to you, even if they're a writer you like, right? So this one, it might or might not. It's kind of funny to me that I found it so useful and so wonderful, because he is a Iowa workshop graduated writer of very intense and complicated literary fiction. He has, I think, only 2 novels out. Yeah, Edinburgh, which is the one he's writing, or Edinburgh, sorry, which is the one he's writing about in this book, and Queen of the Night, which I have read, and which is amazing and astonishing and deep and twisty. And I got really confused at the end, I'm not going to lie, which doesn't mean it wasn't wonderful. But by the end, I was kind of like, I'm not sure I know what's happening anymore. I'm still
Well,
here, but I've kind of, it got, well, you know what it was, is that it's really long, and it's really deeply embedded in the history of both the French Revolution and the world of opera, neither of which I know anything about. So there came a point when those 2 things sort of crashed into each other and ran into the action of the story. And I just wanted to follow the action of the story, but without knowing the stuff about the French Revolution and the history and the opera, it was kind of hard to, it was good. The same thing happened to me with another book recently, where you really needed a really solid working knowledge of Black civil rights movement early, like right after the Civil War, and I didn't want to take the time to follow the hard thread, because I really want to know what would happen, which is a compliment to the book.
yeah. So
That
I mean,
one was Lady the Rib King. That was that. I don't want to not mention. It was called The Rib King. It's excellent. But
and we're talking about, so there's a particular kind of despair we're talking about, which is not that you're stuck. We talked about that before. When you're stuck on a project and you need to find your way out, or you need to figure out how to fix that story, that's one kind of despair. But the despair we're talking about is that level where you get, where you think, really, why do I care so much about writing?
right.
Why do I devote so much of my time to it? It's so
Or
lonely.
why this specific story?
Yeah.
Like, why, I've written this, like, here I am. I've written this whole draft. I've written this draft 17 times. Why am I still why am I still writing it? What am I trying to say here?
Like, why do I
Why is
care?
this worth 3 years of my life?
Yeah.
Even, and every book is worth, it takes a chunk. Like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter which of these brightly colored things back here it is, or how, I mean, this is like this super gay, cheerful, not gay, but in a holidays, Christina Lauren, it's light, it's romance, it's fiction. There's a reason they wrote, that's a writing team, but there's something in one of them, or probably both of them, that is what they wanted to express with this novel. And as a reader, it's probably what pulls you through it, even if you don't realize it. So
Well,
when you can't find that, it's really aggravating.
that is why the book that I've chosen to put up against Alexander Chee's fantastically beautiful new book is Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which is completely not a book that you would think would be on a writer's bookshelf, but I think it should be.
Oh, I've seen it. I've heard so many people talk about it. The truth is, I've never read it.
Absolutely should be. And it's a business book. It is all the examples are about business and about big business, like Apple, and I can't even remember now what all other, but it's a book about leading businesses. And but it did take the world by storm. I know schools that adopted it and had all the teachers read it. I know all kinds of different organizations and institutions, because the basic idea is that people do not purchase what you are producing. And if you're a writer, that means they don't care about your writing, unless they know your why, unless they can feel your why. And that it's not how well you write, or what you write, or what particular story KJ is going to write next. It's that we know that she knows why she's doing it, that his contention is you can feel it, and if you don't have it, you can't fake your way out of that. And I think for writers, there is no more important lesson. And in fact, the first question I ask everybody that works with me as a client is, why are you doing this? Why are you going to spend X amount of years, and we know you're going to fall into despair, and we know it's going to be hard, and it's going to be lonely, and you're going to wonder why, and you're going to end up making 10 cents an hour, or whatever the thing is. You better know why, because your why is what's going to propel you to finish. So I start with why up against, I mean, humbly and a little shamefully, against all the beautifully written books about writing, because I think that's what they all share, is that baseline.
Well, I will defend how to be how to write an autographical biographical novel, and it's beautifully written, friends, as being the second half, I guess. The thing that is glorious about this book is that here is this very prize winning public, people love Alexander Chee's work. He is lauded, he's well reviewed, he's very well respected. And he's writing about writing his first novel. And it took him years to figure out why he was doing it. And that doesn't mean it's not like he would like, why am I writing? I'm going to go be a waiter. And he was a waiter. It was more, of course I'm doing this. I know I have to do it. Like, it's in me. I'm doing this. But why he was telling his particular story. And some of that was that he was almost like hiding it from himself. So I think, and the truth is, he published that novel without, I think, ever really quite coming to an understanding of why he had written it. He came to it later, which is what this is about. And I find that, I just find that helpful, although I suppose it could also like persuade you that you were okay if you couldn't figure out why you were, what your theme
But
was.
I mean, you make a really good point, because his book is very much about searching. He's searching. He's really actively searching, and he knows he's searching for the thread that of his writing. And you mentioned his being a waiter. That I found the passages and the sections where he was writing about that to be incredibly moving. And I kept thinking, why? So back to our question, why is this so moving to write about, or to read about, this writer who decided to be a waiter to support his writing? And there's a part that just had this clarity to it that was amazing, where he's actually working at the home of William F. Buckley and Pat Buckley, like the most famous New York socialites. And he's
most famous New York socialites, and one of the most famous anti-gay writers on the planet. And if we didn't already mention it, Alexander Chee is both an out gay man and also, like, was part of the gay rights, was part of the ACT UP movement in San Francisco during the AIDS epidemic.
That's right. So he goes into this house sort of face to face with this famous anti-gay, famous socialite writer. And but there's a moment where he is, he's got a tray and he's serving appetizers to all the young writers who have congregated and are sort of in the orbit of William F. Buckley. And he sort of smugly thinks, I know I'm making more money than you are. And there was something about that whole passage that you could just see his mind at work, and his motivation at work, and that he knows he's going to make it. That's what I think for a writer who's struggling for why the hell are you doing this? That's what's so pleasurable is.
Yeah, I think you're right. Even though these are essays that are written along this path, you can tell as the reader, you kind of know something he doesn't. Which is not just that he is going to be fine, but that he actually on some level knows he's going to be fine, or great. And
it's stunning. I mean, there was a passage
and
about
reassuring.
It's very reassuring. There's a passage about when he's dressing up for Halloween in the Castro, there's a famous gay parade, drag parade and on Halloween in that part of San Francisco, and he's dressing up as a woman, and I think possibly for the first time in a very public way
Yes. Yeah.
that he's doing that. And it is so spectacularly beautiful the way he writes about it. But what he's writing about is these identities and masks and seeing and presenting, and who's the watcher and who's the teller of that story. And he talks about drag as a storytelling tool or mechanism, and sort of embodying that. And like you read that, and I found it riveting, just his details and his description of what it was like to be in his skin that night. But also, just like we were saying, you just know this is a writer. This guy is a writer who is writing that, and there's nothing else he could be, right? Just because the way he's seeing that act is, story has so many layers about who is telling and who is watching and who knows what. And like to your point, and what does the reader know versus the teller? Where does that person stand in time? All of that is all in every single thing he writes.
And I think the thing that spoke to me at this particular moment in time, at this particular moment in the draft that I'm writing, is those layers. This is really a book about the layers of the ways in which he sees himself, which he then turns out into the layers of the way he sees his protagonist, which then becomes the layers of the way the protagonist sees themselves. So that change in the protagonist is about, not, it is about a revelation for the protagonist, but that revelation is about it's about the protagonist's inner feeling. And I haven't actually read Edinburgh yet, although I'm absolutely going to. But that was what was so useful to me, was the whole idea of the protagonist who cannot see themselves clearly, and how that relates to our inability to see ourselves clearly.
Yeah, no, it's really powerful stuff. I have not read any of his other books, but I will too.
And now you will.
Now I will. But back to start with why.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I think we're talking about here is, can you write your way to a solution in a particular book, or can you write your way into being a writer? Or must you start with defining why you're doing it and what your story is about and all those things? And I could argue both sides vehemently. I have, as a writer, done both. And as a person who coaches writers, I push people to do this way, the start with why way.
I think it would be so much better. I just don't seem to have achieved it.
And that's the thing we're talking about here, is that there's theory and then there's practice. And there's, I think when you're working with an editor, or you're working with a book coach, or you have some sort of external force that's pressing on you saying, answer this, tell me why, what's your why, what's your why? It's potentially easier to come up with it. It's not always doable, but I still believe that trying to define your why is better than really just writing into a void and trying to write your way to it. And like what you're doing, KJ, with your book right now, I think is actually more in the middle, which is, you started knowing what you wanted to write about and why you wanted to write about it.
I thought so anyway.
And then the doing of it led you to a different place. And maybe that different place is just a fraction off of where you started, or maybe it's more than that, but at least you aimed at a target and hit the target. Maybe you're not in the bullseye yet, but
something I learned in the aftermath of the Chicken Sisters is that you don't necessarily learn how to talk about the theme of your novel until people start asking. Nobody says, what is the theme of your novel? They say, so tell us what your novel's about. But you can't just say, well, it's about, a reality TV competition between two restaurants, because nobody wants to read that. They kind of do, people are like, some people are either like, yes, that is my jam, or no, that is not my jam. But it also needs to be, it's about two sisters resolving their lifelong conflict over who made the right life choices. And you don't learn how to say that in a soundbite until you've had to a few
Right.
times, or at least the first time you don't. But after that, it sort of helps to find that place. And it's not an easy place to find, I think. Even if it's in your book, it's hard to figure out. It's hard to put 8 words to it.
Totally. And that harkens back to one of our previous episodes where we talked about the situation and the story, right? The story in your case is the two restaurants and the
Yep.
reality TV show, but the situation is these two sisters and a hometown and all this
Right.
stuff. I had a really fascinating experience in writing one of my novels where I was on a very tight deadline and I had turned it into my editor at Penguin. And we had an editorial call where we were going over the entire manuscript and all the things that had to be fixed. And it was, it was like a very long call. There was a lot that needed to be fixed. Yeah. And we had a deadline and the whole thing. And then we got to the last chapter of the book. And she said, the whole thing just falls off a cliff here in this last chapter. I don't think you really know what this book is about. So I don't think you know how to conclude it. And I was like, tell me, I don't know what this book is about. Like I was totally fishing around for this conclusion. And she played that sort of Socratic method game with me. She's like, well, what do you think it was about? And, and I was throwing things. She's like, no, not that. No, I was finally, tell me what it's about. And she told me, and I was just like, oh, like I just didn't know that was really what my why was. And I had never tried to articulate it. And it was clear in the pages, but then I had to go back and tighten it so that it was clear to the reader.
Yeah.
And that the resolution gave us, what we wanted for that message. But, so I am a perfect example of someone who did not start with why and still managed to write what was a pretty good book. But I think I could always do better if I did start with why.
Yeah. It's just really hard. So reading about somebody else's experience of it, and yeah, it's funny. So I'm in a fortunate position of being interviewed about my fiction periodically, and people have been asking me over the past 6 months or so, so what's the next book about, right? And for many months, I would go with the plot. It's about two women who get caught up in a literary fraud of their own making, or it's about a woman who doesn't want to own her writing of an unexpectedly popular novel. So when she gets a chance to go on the Today Show, she pushes her best friend out in her place. And it is about all those things. But it's only since reading How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. Oh, and I have something else to say about this. But anyway, to finish that story, that I have figured out, and who knows, this may yet even evolve again, but it is about the gap between the way you see yourself and the way your mother sees you, and your horrible fear that your mother is right.
Okay.
That's what it's about. And when I say that, people are like, oh, I'm so in. And it's about, and then I say, and it's about, a farm and a literary fraud and all the, but that's what it's about. And
I'm like pumping my fist.
I know, it's good, right?
It's so good.
So
and I mean, oh, no, you go.
Oh, but I don't remember. There's something else I desperately wanted to say about it. Oh, I know. The other thing that's wonderful about this, that my novel is not an autobiographical novel. His novel, in the end, is not it is not like his story, only I changed the names, which is also very much, well, now mine, what, and that is the other thing I loved about this, is that idea. This is almost like how to find the kernel of autobiography in your novel. Like it's it's how to find the piece that is you, that you want to put out into the world.
So can we talk about that? Because the title of this book, well, first of all, it reminded me of the novel How to Make an American Quilt, which is quite old now, but it was not a novel about sewing. It was a novel about immigration in America and many other things. But it kind of, I love titles that sort of tease you like this. Like, it is not a how-to book.
Nope.
It is not a how to write book. It is not even an autobiographical, like none of the things in the title are what it is. And he never really explains that.
There is an essay by that title at the end of the book, but it is written in single sentence instructions. It says, I'm just, you decide you will, you watch each other. You must write it. You decide. It would be so easy. When you begin, you are like someone left in the woods with an axe and a clear memory of houses, deciding to build a house. You decide you will teach yourself to furnish everything with that axe. You are the axe. The woods is your life. And then it goes on, it's not like.
It's brilliant. It's like worth the entire cost of the book, that chapter.
Yeah. You cannot sue yourself. I mean, Anyway, it's just really
when you sit down
wonderful.
To try, the perfection is gone.
Yeah.
It's like a description of being a writer. When you sit down to try, the perfection is gone.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I know. So good. It's so good. I mean, we could make a list of writers writing about writing, and this book should be way at the top of it.
Way at the top.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Really, really good. But start with why on your bookshelf too, because you're selling something when you're writing a novel. If you want people to pay for it, if you want readers, if you want, publishers to give you cash money, you're making product. And the dog agrees with me that you should start with why.
Do you have 5 things you liked about it?
Oh, so many more than 5, but I'm going to take a stab at it. I like reading across genres when trying to learn about writing something. So for all writers, reading a business book is reading across genre. So that's my first favorite thing about it. My second favorite thing about it is it comes with a TED Talk by the same name that has like a gazillion views. So if you don't really want to read the whole book, you can just listen to the TED Talk, and it's 18 minutes and you get the bulk of what you need in the first 6 anyway. So that is one of the things I like about it. One of the things I like about it, the third thing is also something that makes me crazy, but he's got this, I'm holding it up on the video, these silly design things, these illustrations, that's the word I'm looking for. And it's literally like why is in the middle, and then there's the how, and then there's the what. And it's just so reductive and simple and sort of silly, but you can't get it out of your head. It's so useful. He calls it the golden circle. And I have so many times told people, you got to get this book and read about the golden circle, because it's so powerful. And look at how silly it is. So I love that he understands the way we retain information is sometimes we need a little help to have it hook in our brain. I love that about it. I love that he's talking about products. He's talking about buying and selling, because writers need to think that way. And what's the 5th thing I love? It's got really great stories. I love business stories so much. I just think they're these great tales of working against all odds, which is what writers are doing too, and persisting despite the naysayers and being knocked down. And he's got a lot of stories about how the why carried people through those times in businesses that we all use and know and love. And I love that. All right. What about you?
I will say, I think that the why carried Alexander Chee through even when he didn't know what the why was. So that's woo. So, so I totally have 5 things I love the glimpses of a writing life that I didn't have. I love looking at the Iowa Writers Workshop or the workshop with Annie Dillard, but not in it's not in an exclusive sort of way. Doesn't make you feel like if you didn't do those things, you're not worthy. Not even at all. Not because he felt very out of place, which I think probably everybody does. But anyway, I love those glimpses. I love the truth about that, which is that he went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. He wrote a draft of his first novel. He entered it into whatever competition they have at the end and thought to himself, well, there's $20 wasted. And then he won. And, success and publication was coming and it was going to rain down on him. And it doesn't. It takes 2 years to sell the novel after that. And I loved that truth, that being admitted into that inner sanctum didn't mean, it didn't give him success. He still had to find people who believed him in a different way. And just as an aside, that was in part because what he had written was not part of the white male literary canon, and he needed to find people who believed in that. So that's a great story. But I love how he describes what he's doing when he writes that novel. He's like, I'm just going to write a shitty autobiographical first novel like everybody else does and get paid a lot of money for it. Like, it's like he's putting himself down and he doesn't even know it. And that is not easy task. And he discovers that that's not an easy task, but he must on some level have known that it wasn't easy for anyone, even if it looks easy. So there's that. I loved the ordinariness. So he's a little older than I am, but I can really, many of the places he's been in his life, I've been at that Halloween party you mentioned in the Castro. I've been I've been a cater waiter very briefly, but I did it. I like, so a lot of that I loved, and I liked having that as part of it. And finally, I love the way he looks at his narrators and himself.
So good. So good. I mean, I think that my book wins, but this is a fantastic book.
Yours might be overall. If you can only have one, maybe yours is more immediately useful, but you can get the TED Talk for free and spend your money on this.
That's a good point. That's a good point. All the writing books about writers becoming writers, all good, right?
All the books. Yes. Yeah.
So in our next episode, we are going to be talking about what we call writer comfort reads.
Yes. That is going to be a very good one. So, as I say at the end of every episode, if you want more, there's many more episodes of this, as well as 250 plus episodes of the regular #AmWriting podcast. You can find us on any pod player. You can find the episodes of this series and this series only on YouTube. And you can always get in touch with us by reaching out via our website, which is amwritingpodcast.com, or on Facebook. Very good place to do it, in the Am Writing Podcast Facebook. If you have enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you left us a review. That's what we'd like. Please leave a review in the comments on your pod player, or heck, on YouTube. The YouTube piece of this is new to us, but very exciting. All right. We're done for today. So until next week, keep your butt in the chair and your head in the game.